This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Jack Hirsch. Jack, I think we're going to be lonely tonight because I don't know about your area, but in my area, it's nothing but baseball and the fighting Phils, and they're playing right now. So I'm sure a lot of our people are going to catch us on a replay. All I can say is this, Jack. When I want you to be right, you're wrong. And when I want you to be wrong, you're right. These Phillies are smoking hot. And I mean, Smoking Joe, from the town of Smoking Joe Frazier, we've got the smoking hot Phillies. And I think they're going to win the game of the century to win the World Series. Hope I'm wrong. Good evening. How are you?
What game of the century are you talking about, Frank? They're not in the
In
show
Philadelphia,
now.
every playoff game is the game of the century.
Well, listen, they have some other news, the town of Philadelphia. I mean, it's still an Eagles town, but if the Phillies win the World Series and the Eagles don't win the Super Bowl, does it become a Philly town more than an Eagles town? That'll be interesting.
Jack, this town is Eagles all the way. When Hopkins was the champion, we didn't hear about him much. We had all those great fights. The light heavyweights that fought out and trained in Philly during the 80s, they weren't big news. Smoking Joe was the last really, really big news. Philadelphia is a football town. Yes, they'll go crazy. They'll have to grease the poles when the Phillies win the World Series. But this town is a football town.
The number one sports icon in Philadelphia, let's settle it, was Smoking Joe Frazier. Let's give him the nod over Mike Schmidt, Will Chamberlain, Dr. J, whoever else.
You know what, Jack? That's an interesting question. Dr. J, Mike Schmidt, who else? Bobby Clark?
Will Chamberlain was that part of his career. I'm a little partial to Bobby Clark. Had such a great, long, meritorious career as a flyer. But Smoking Joe's Philadelphia through and through. Speaking of the Philadelphia theme, it was in the news. A major personality from the Rocky movies passed away, in Burt Young yesterday. And yeah, at the age of 83, and Burt Young was known as Paulie, one of these rough, tough characters. And I could see him at the Eagle games dressed up the way, he was. But those Rocky movies are classics, and Burt Young certainly helped them along, with his overall personality and all. I'm not that sure of his background as a fighter. I heard he was trained by Customato and all that, but I'm not that familiar with it. I'm not.
Jack,
sure
he fought in the Marines. He never had a pro fight. He never had a fight as a pro, but he did fight in the Marines, I believe, and he had a few fights.
And maybe,
but his record gets totally overblown.
Yeah, well, but regardless, yeah, I mean, he had a great. What he did for the Rocky franchise, for those movies, I mean, you can't really measure it. You needed a certain personality, a buddy of Rocky Balboa's, a real, tough type guy who could be really funny as well. And that was Burt Young.
My favorite character in the Rocky movies was Gazzo's driver, the bodyguard. He'd say, "Take her to the zoo."
Well, that would be like you and our guy Pags, basically. And yeah.
Okay, you're right. Hey, that's pretty good. Yeah, we'll call Pags. I see him. Want to say Pags? Let's go to the zoo, because that's what watching games in Philly are like. All right, Jack. So Burt Young passed. He was definitely a big contributor in the Rocky movies and a personality. And he did hang out with fighters, and he was seen in a lot of fights. So the guy was no doubt a fight fan.
I saw him at a couple of shows, and I remember seeing him at a banquet once. I never spoke to him, but he liked being around the fight crowd as a fan.
Right.
And also, he was close friends with Bobby Cassidy. Okay, and I remember when Bobby Cassidy was boxing, and David Sears, as well, who fought for the world light heavyweight title. He
fought Michael Spinks.
Right, he may have been a co-manager, David Sears, because I remember.
I think he was
fighting on TV. Burt Young was all nervous in the corner, saying he's going to take him out. You know, his guy David Sears, and he got Bobby Cassidy, the former light heavyweight contender, apart in the Rocky movie. People might not know, at the end of the movie, they're waiting for the decision, and Rocky's calling for Adrian, and she's trying to get in the ring, and the police officer's holding back Burt Young like this. Said, "Come on, buddy, come on." That police officer was Bobby Cassidy.
I didn't know that, Jack.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good piece of trivia.
And you know who Spider Rico was? You know who that was?
That was Pedro Lavelle.
Exactly, right. Pedro
Yes.
Lavelle. But that was Bobby Cassidy was the police officer there. And he got the part, I'm sure, because he was close friends with Burt Young. And say this for Stallone, whenever he can slip a real fight in, he did. I don't think Stallone actually did right by Chuck Wepner, considering Wepner was the inspiration for the Rocky character altogether. And they used certain scenes in the Rocky movies that were complete takeoff of Chuck Wepner. Even when he was knocked down, Rocky, in the first, movie, the way he was getting up, that was the way Chuck Wepner was trying to get up against Muhammad Ali. Same type thing. And with the wrestler, Thunder Lips throwing Rocky out of the ring. That was Andre the Giant throwing Chuck Wepner out. So, despite what
Jack, Joe Frazier went to his grave believing that the script was really his life, because he worked in the meat house. Well, that's what he thought. He worked in the meat house.
Yeah.
He hit the meat. He was from Philly. So Joe actually thought that was some of his life. And Joe had a cameo in the first one.
He did.
Remember before the first fight, he gets in the ring and he starts messing around with Apollo Creed?
Oh, that was funny. And no one enjoyed that scene more than Muhammad Ali, because when he was watching the movie theater, he knew he was Apollo Creed, and to see Joe Frazier, and this was 1976. Well, he was fond of Frazier by that time, very fond of him. Even Frazier hated Ali. But for Ali to see Smoking Joe get in the ring, go, "You next, Joe," like Ali absolutely loved it. Yeah. But Burt Young, we remember him fondly.
Yeah, the Rocky movies, Jack, they contributed to boxing. I know people have a hard time with Stallone being in the Hall of Fame, but he contributed to boxing. And Jack, think about this. Before we leave this topic, think about this. And this will morph into what we're going to talk about regarding no showtime and maybe boxing being eliminated from the Olympics. But think about 1976. In 1976, Muhammad Ali is the undisputed heavyweight champ, probably the most known figure in the world, at least by his face. In January of 76, Foreman and Lyle fight on national TV on a Saturday afternoon and have one of the most exciting fights he's ever seen. A couple months later, the U.S. Olympic boxing team wins 7 medals, 5 gold at the 76 Olympics. Later, and 2 or 3 months after that, the movie Rocky comes out. So think about that. You have Ali, Foreman Lyle, the 76 Olympic team, and Rocky coming all within a period of 10 months. That was the heyday of boxing. That's when boxing really took off. And you could say maybe after football and baseball, it was in the running for maybe like the 3rd or 4th most popular sport at the time. Not the case today, as we saw this week. Showtime is shutting its doors down. I think they have one more fight slated for the end of the year. And there's also talk, Jack, that Olympic boxing for 2028 is on hold for the Olympics.
Let me just say something about Olympic boxing. I couldn't care less if it leaves and never comes back. Lousy decisions, lousy judging. if a guy wants to stay, or woman, as an amateur, they can fight in the world championships if they want, and they win. If they win in the world championships, they're the best amateur in the world. I'm just sick of it. After 1988, after the decision that deprived Roy Jones of the gold medal, I threw in the towel. Basically, it was so ridiculous what took place. He's voted Roy Jones he's given the Val Baker Award as the best boxer,
outstanding fighter,
games, but he doesn't have a gold medal. How can you be the best boxer without a gold medal? So correct the darn thing. Have an investigation. And one of the judges said in the Roy Jones fight, he thought that Jones won so decisively, he didn't want the South Korean boxer to be embarrassed by having no one vote for him because South Korea was hosting the Olympics. He didn't want the host country to be embarrassed. So he threw a vote to the South Korean, figuring it was harmless because Jones won so overwhelmingly. And that was the deciding vote.
and there was a payoff in that too.
Well, yeah, but the South
Came out later.
Even the South Korean fighter, even to this day, he says he absolutely lost the fight. He could tell when he's lost the fight. And he says he knows he lost to Roy Jones. And he said it would have been a big, big honor to have a silver medal. He would have been very proud of it. So now they gave him a tarnished gold medal. Which
They did two guys wrong.
He's embarrassed to have that gold medal. Credit to the South Korean. A lot of credit to him for being a realist. And, something should be corrected. But
Jack,
yeah,
the reasons that you stated are the reasons why they're thinking about getting rid of it, because of the bad decisions, the no reform, there's no regulation really, and nobody knows who's doing what, and everything changes. It's a joke, and that's why they're getting rid of it. But I don't want to see it go, Jack, because I remember as a little kid watching George Foreman beat Chipolis, and that was a big thing for me as a 10-year-old. And then following their careers. Now, look, that changed, and that leads to my next question. We haven't really seen Olympic fights for 20 years. I mean, the last Olympics, I remember seeing the fights where it wasn't a big deal, were the David Reed Mayweather 96 Olympics. After that, I mean, you had to search for it. I mean, I saw some of Andre Ward's fights in 2004, but since then, they're on at 3:00 in the morning, and there's 15 channels. You can't find it. So we really haven't seen Olympic boxing for almost 20 years where we've actually seen it and viewed it.
Well, the Olympics used to breed stars, like the 1992 Olympics. We got Oscar De La Hoya. If you can get a personality like that, who's given big play in the lead up to the Olympics, like De La Hoya, Sugar Ray Leonard, and then they win the gold medal and people are watching them go through the Olympics, yeah, there's always a possibility of a resurgence because everyone gets excited. But keep in mind, when those guys used to fight, like the 76 Olympic team, you didn't have all those cable channels. You didn't have other options to watch. You had basic TV. Everyone was tuned into the Olympics. People, for the most part, at least in the United States, don't care about the Olympics. The fights, you have to search for them. There's so many Olympic channels. You don't know when they're having boxing, what time. And I've sometimes accidentally come upon an Olympic fight, and it's just a situation like who
and then they went to that computer scoring, and nothing was more frustrating than when you see a guy land clear punches and you don't see it tabulate because 3 of the 5 judges have to all hit the button at the same time. If they don't, the fighter doesn't get credit for it. The scoring was a joke. So it really does need to be reformed if they're going to keep it. But I'm going to miss it. I don't think it's good for the sport. But then again, I can sit back and say,
no substitute for honesty, Frank. And no matter how you do the buttons, hitting this and that, a judge who is leaning towards one fight is going to be a little slow to hit the button a certain way. So nothing's going to change, Frank. Nothing's going to change at all. And I've basically given up on Olympic boxing. I follow certain fighters if they're outstanding amateurs, but it's usually, the Europeans, the Russians, the Cubans who've had a ton of amateur fights, the Vasily Lomachenko types.
Jack, what now? Showtime. There was a big fight on Showtime this past weekend. We'll get to that in a minute. But I don't think it's a good thing that we're losing Showtime 5 years after we lost HBO.
It's a terrible thing because, and let me tell you how this is going to affect the marketplace in boxing, Frank. Fighters won't be able to offer their services, or promoters. They're going to be stuck. They won't have the option, let's say, for example, Al Heyman, the PBC, of going to Showtime, going to HBO, going here, going there, offering, the services of their fighters. So basically, they're on their own now. The PBC, Al Heyman, they did their business with Showtime, the pay-per-view events. Now they've got to find someone else who's basically going to bankroll it. And Showtime was a very stable network, extremely, extremely stable, reliable in the way they did business. And think of the Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence rematch. They're contracted for rematch. Who's going to promote it? I mean, who's going to push it? Well, who's going to do the all access thing, building it up? I mean, chances are that fight's not taking place. So the fighters are going to understand they're fighting for a lot less money now. So that's what's going to affect directly. They used to paydays reaching a certain ceiling, and it's not even going to come anywhere close to that ceiling.
The only good thing that can come from that is we'll see more guys fighting and not sitting around waiting for the big payday if that avenue exists.
Yeah, it's like your boss calling you in. You've worked there for years. You're used to making an X amount for your salary, telling you have to take a big cut. And you have nowhere to go because no one else is hiring. So, but let's see how many fighters are going to swallow their pride. Some of them might want to play hardball the way that Terrence Crawford's played hardball. It paid off for him. Before him, Bernard Hopkins, who tried to play hardball until they can get what they want. They might not be in that position. You know who might benefit by Showtime going out of business, actually? Possibly Matchroom Boxing, Eddie Hearn there. Possibly, because he still has to deal with the zone and we're going to see. But we know something, Frank, what boxing is now. It's not what it used to be. The Frank Laturzos aren't the fans anymore. Last night, I was at a meeting for the New York State Hall of Fame. I'm on the committee, with some other guys. And we had hardcore boxing people there. We had Randy Gordon, who's sure you've been on a number of times. Don Majeski, Henry Haskup, Bobby Cassidy, on. And I'm missing a couple of guys. Jose Corpus. These guys are really hardcore boxing people. And now the fans like entertainers. I mean, I don't know, is it true or not? Tommy Fury, over 1 million pay-per-view buys. I can't believe that happened. But more people get a nonsensical boxing match between entertainers over a great hardcore fight.
I know, Jack. I can't understand it. But again, a lot of the problem is we don't see good fights and there's not exposure. We don't see these guys on their way up like we did in the 60s and 70s and 80s and part of the 90s. And that is a big thing. It's like they can't build a following. So back in the day, you'd see Hearns on 1 week and then 2 weeks later you'd see Leonard. They'd clear out the division, and then when they fought, it would be on pay-per-view. That was a big thing, but there was already a market there for that. That's not going to be the case now. I mean, and that model has already been broken, and that's what's bad. Look, you saw the post I made a couple days ago, the year-end rankings in 1973, the top 10 heavyweights, and I wrote down who fought whom. Okay, Jack, every guy on that list in the top 10 at the end of 73, Foreman was the champ, fought at least 4 other guys on that list. Muhammad Ali fought everybody on the list out of the other 9, which encompassed 15 fights. Frazier, I think, fought 6 or 7, which encompassed 12 fights. You don't see that today. Try to do that today and match the guys who's fought. You won't see it.
Well, yeah, like they talk about Tyson Fury. He's fighting a mixed martial artist. And he's saying, well, Ali did the same thing against wrestler Antonio Inoki.
Not the same.
But Ali had just fought Joe Frazier, Ken Norton. He fought the toughest challenges.
He made 4 title defenses that year.
Yeah.
Okay, and then he did the Inoki thing, and that ruined him for his fight against Ken Norton because his legs were messed up and he couldn't run.
And
I mean, it wasn't a smart decision on his part. He made a lot of money, but it didn't extend his career.
Right. I'm not going to comment, Frank, on what's going on in the Middle East, but obviously it's a troubled situation. But as far as it affecting boxing, which is unimportant on the scale of things, but we are talking boxing, I wonder with Saudi Arabia and all the money for the Fury Usyk fight, how that might get affected.
That's a good point.
No one is saying anything, even talking about it, but you kind of wonder, is it going to be so unsettled that they're not going to have that massive offer? Then is Fury going to decide, I just want to make money? It seems like Tyson Fury, who you don't like to talk about, understandably so.
No, look, Jack. He's a big name.
Is he concerned with legacy or money or both? I don't think he's even that concerned about legacy. Most fighters, the bottom line is money's the most important thing at the end of the day. They got to make the big money, these guys.
Right.
We understand that. We don't begrudge them about
legacy
that.
Doesn't pay your bills.
But legacy is very important to, a lot of fighters. For all of Floyd Mayweather's money, all he's been trying to do is protect his legacy by trying to remind everyone on this. Tyson Fury strikes me, he's the type of fighter, he doesn't care that much at the end. That's how he strikes me.
I also think, Jack, he thinks he's a strong enough personality that he can sell everybody on how good he is. And remember, Mayweather's calling card is he's undefeated. If he loses the decision to Castillo, it's a different world completely for Mayweather.
Exactly.
Tyson Fury's undefeated. If he retires undefeated, that's a lot of cachet for him to say, I'm the GOAT. I'm bigger than everybody. I never lost. I beat the best, hardest puncher of my era in Wilder 2 out of 3 times. Maybe some people may even think 3, but I think that's the route he's going to go. I think he's all about the money now, and I think he thinks he's bigger than the game, and he's already carved his legacy. I think he really thinks as long as he's undefeated, he doesn't have to fight Usyk or Joshua or anybody. And you know what, Jack? To a degree, he could be right.
Yeah, and this latest fight this fight he's going to have October 28th. Technically, it's a boxing match. It's going to go on his record. It's funny you mentioned Mayweather. He likes to point out other fighters losing fights, this, that. He says, well, Norton beat Ali 3 times. He didn't. The second fight, I thought Ali won. Most people thought Ali won the second fight. The third fight's close. Could have gone either way. I had Norton up by a point. You had Ali up by a point.
Right.
I remember being in Yankee Stadium when the final.
We were both there.
I was uncertain. My feeling was, wow, this is so close. I don't know how it's going to go. My scorecard had Norton up a point, but it wasn't a surprise, a shock to me. Ali got the decision. And then you hear later, oh, Norton was robbed, this and that. But whatever. But Mayweather, if I was going to argue with Mayweather while he was boasting, I'd say, hey, wait a second. Most people don't feel you won the Castillo fight. And what about Marcus Maidana at the end of your career? Why did you have a rematch with him? Because a lot of people felt you didn't win that fight.
That's why I fought him again.
That's why I fought him a rematch at the end of it. And then he fought a guy, Conor McGregor, who never even had a pro fight. So I don't want to hear Mayweather's nonsense. Mayweather is the greatest fighter pound for pound of this century. Let's give him that. Okay, the last 23 years.
I think Terrence Crawford's a better fighter.
Mayweather's more accomplished. How's that? Right now than Terrence Crawford.
I mean, Jack, that would be hard for me to argue against, but there are some things that Crawford can say that Mayweather can't. Like Crawford was undisputed in 2 divisions, and he's never had a close fight or a
Right.
close
Everyone
call.
was undisputed in the past. Come on, I don't want to hear undisputed.
What's that, Jack?
Everyone was undisputed in the past.
Mayweather was never undisputed. He never unified the title.
But we knew who, you know who the champion is. Logic tells you who is the champion in a division. I don't care what sanctioning bodies say then. It means nothing. If
Basically, I agree with you,
champion
Jack. But you know what? Crawford never retired to avoid certain guys. Mayweather did. I mean, on paper, Mayweather has had the better career. He's won 5 titles compared to Crawford's 3. One's 41-0. Mayweather's really 49-0. I'm not going to count McGregor, but I think Crawford is the greater fighter. But you know what, Jack? Greatness and who's better are 2 different conversations. I could make a case that Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Tom Brady as far as his gifts and maybe being a better quarterback. But when you go by all that Brady's done and his accomplishments, you can't say that Rodgers is better. I think, Jack, I think that Peyton Manning for a few years played the position better than any quarterback I've ever seen, including Brady, Marino, Elway, whoever. However, when you look at their playoff numbers and Brady's accomplishments, and he's got 7 Super Bowls compared to other guys that have 2 and 3 and a couple have 4, you know, you can't say anybody is better than Brady. And Mayweather has the accomplishments.
Different eras. You know, I get a little tired of Mayweather going on and on what his argument is, but you shouldn't be annoyed at him boasting, because in reality, people are going to hate to hear this. Muhammad Ali did the same thing. He used to say, I'm the greatest.
But Jack, we know it was kind of a joke, and he did it with a twinkle in his eye.
Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. Yeah. Like the fights with Ernie Terrell and Floyd Patterson. He had a twinkle in his eye, Frank.
Yeah, but Jack, nobody says he's the greatest because he beat Ernie Terrell and Floyd Patterson. We knew he was selling the gate in his brand at that time.
He was magnificent, Ali, in the way he boxed in that Terrell fight. And no one gives him credit for turning in a tremendous performance. That may have been the best performance of Ali's career. He didn't stop Terrell, but he was in with a great fighter in Terrell. Terrell was a great fighter that night, not an all-time.
Jack, you really believe you would, if you consider Ernie Terrell a great heavyweight?
That at his very peak of his powers, he would have beaten most of the heavyweight champions before him at his very peak. He had a nice style.
I disagree, Jack. I disagree. The best thing that happened to Muhammad Ali was the exile, because when he came back, it gave him a chance to prove himself past his prime against some certified greats. Remember, if Ali never gets his license back, and his last fight is Zora Foley, and he's 29-0 with 23 knockouts, other than Liston, everybody's going to say, well, who did he beat? And a lot of people are going to say, well, Liston took a dive, at least in the second fight, maybe the first fight. So he really needed that run in the 70s to solidify his greatness. As great as he was in the 60s, I don't think we'd be having a conversation that Ali is one of the GOATs or the GOAT without him coming back in the 70s. And you know this as well as I do. None of the old school guys, none of the old school writers gave Ali or considered him the GOAT until he beat George Foreman. Remember, going to that fight, everybody thought, okay, this is Liston in his prime, and he's going to get from Foreman what he would have got 10 years earlier from Liston if he was in his peak. But nobody called Ali the GOAT until he beat Foreman.
No, they didn't call him the GOAT after he beat Foreman. It was kind of many years later. In the 1980s, it started changing, because I remember 1978, people talking, and the consensus by far was Joe Louis was number 1, Ali was number 2. But then a lot of the people who viewed Lewis's fights, they passed on, and then Ali took over. You know, as future generations come on the scene, opinions change. This is kind of, in a way, the Mayweather generation still. The mindset is, is Mayweather the greatest of all time? And they put him on a level with Sugar Ray Robinson. Some people put him ahead of Robinson.
Oh my God.
And no, I listen. I'm not an apologist for Sugar Ray Robinson. He wasn't so head and shoulders above everyone. I hate the talk. Oh, how can you compare Roy Jones to Sugar Ray Robinson? It's not even close. Sugar Ray Leonard,
Physically, it's close.
not
As
even
far as
close.
their gifts as a
Let me tell
fighter,
you
it's close.
something. If Sugar Ray Robinson at his peak fought Sugar Ray Leonard at his peak, you're talking about a close fight, close decision fight. That's what you're talking about. Let's not get, I mean, Robinson put together an astounding record, something like one loss in the first 112 fights. Astounding.
He was 128, 1-2 with 86 knockouts at his prime.
So you can call Robinson the greatest fighter of all time. I'm good with that. I'm good with him being called the best pound for pound of all time. But I don't want to hear this nonsense. Don't even compare anyone to him. If you want to talk about his accomplishments, I'm okay if people want to make that argument to say, don't compare other accomplishments to Sugar Ray's, that they're clearly better. I'm okay with that. But I don't want to hear that the great fighters like Leonard, Hearns, they couldn't even, a Roy Jones, a Mayweather, if the weight was the same as Robinson, couldn't compete with Sugar Ray Robinson and conceivably defeat him.
Jack, first of all, when you're talking about Leonard and Hearns, you're also talking about all-time greats. I agree with you. If Prime Robinson fought Prime Leonard, I think Robinson would win conclusively. But if they fought 4 or 5 times, as you like to say, I'm not sure Robinson beats him every time. But I think that's more of a mark on how great Leonard was than the Rip Robinson. And then the other thing I would say to you is you've already admitted that Robinson has the accomplishments. Okay, fine. We agree on that. And no one could dispute that. But Jack, when you look at Robinson as a fighter and all he brought to the ring from head to toe, inside and out, I don't think I've ever seen another fighter on his level. And I would be even willing to say it's not even real close. I've never seen anybody who could box, punch, put combinations together, going sideways, forward, backwards, combine toughness, endurance, and meanness the way Robinson did. I think he is by far, I won't even entertain an argument. He's number one as the greatest fighter who has ever lived. To me, the argument begins with who's number two. That's just me.
That's fine. That's fine. You rate him first. I was thinking the other day of one of Robinson's fights, and no one ever brought this up. This is a great debatable question. What one single fight in boxing history where you had 2 guys in the ring, you had the greatest talent in the ring, but not at the time they fought, because a lot of times iconic fighters like a Muhammad Ali was past his prime against Larry Holmes. But let's make believe both were in their prime. Okay? Think of all the great matchups in boxing history. And you know what I think the most talent of all time would have been? The greatest fighters? Robinson and Henry Armstrong. But Armstrong was past his peak, so you can't judge it that way. But hypothetically, if Armstrong was at his peak, you wouldn't have had like a greater matchup. I'm talking about as far as, greatness in the ring.
But are you going by accomplishment? Because I think as a fighter, I think Robinson is far superior to Armstrong. I just think that Armstrong was so strong and had such an overload of the one thing he did that it made up for some of the things he lacked. I mean, he could only fight going forward. He was the preeminent attacker, where Robinson was much more versatile and probably a harder puncher pound for pound.
Costamato used to say Henry Armstrong was the greatest of all time. That was his guy. He rated him over Robinson, actually. And Henry Armstrong was a little Joe Frazier. I guess he didn't have the left hook that Joe had, and that Joe's left hook was a difference maker. But Joe Frazier wasn't really a one-punch fighter. We remember the classic knockdown against Ali, but really he'd have to keep beating on you, Joe Frazier. Well, he was nonstop.
He could really hit, but he wasn't a one-punch knockout guy.
Right, right.
I mean, against other elite guys. I mean, knocked out guys with one punch, but
Frank,
against
what was
elite
the
guys.
greatest knockdown in boxing history? The greatest knockdown. I think Frazier Ali. They're having a thing Firpo and Dempsey, but I don't. You could say Dempsey being sent out of the ring was the greatest knockdown because he was, feet in the air. George Bellows, the classic photo. But I think, the Frazier knockdown of Ali was like so magnificent. It was
As
like
far as a knockdown where it wasn't a knockout, I would agree.
Right. Where guy just.
I mean, Marciano gets a lot of the props because of the Walcott knockout. Walcott had a spectacular knockout against Charles and Robinson against Fulmer.
Okay, Frank, it's old news now, but it's still in the news. Tim Tszyu. Are you a believer now? Or you feel the same way you did about him? You see improvement in Tim Tszyu? Has the gap closed between him and Jermell Charlo? Because that's the fight that seems to be inevitable that's going to be made. But now it's Showtime out of the boxing business.
Yeah, who knows?
Don't know what they're going to get made.
Okay. I think Tim Tszyu is elite. I think he may have closed the gap with Charlo Jack, but I think it's a little hard to get a good gauge because Charlo did not look good against Canelo. Tim Tszyu cannot do to Charlo what Canelo did, and even Canelo couldn't stop him. I still think stylistically, I think Charlo has the edge. If they sign to fight, I will pick Charlo to win. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it, but it would be a confident pick. And I'll just say this, and you've heard me say this as long as we've been doing this show. When guys go up in weight and come back down, they usually run into problems. But the difference with Charlo is he didn't build up to get bigger. He didn't pack muscle on. He just cut less weight than he does when he fought at 154. So I don't think he's going to be as effective or affected coming back down to 54 as he would have if he would have packed on weight like, say, Roy Jones did to fight Ruiz. I don't think he'll be hurt like that. So I think Charlo has the style and the power to beat Tim Tszyu. And if we go back to that fight with Mendoza, I don't know about you, Jack, but I had that fight pretty even after 6 rounds. And then when Tszyu hurt him in the 7th round, it was all downhill. And then from that point on, he walked Mendoza down and pretty much beat him down. But for the first half of that fight, Mendoza was clearly in the fight.
Okay, just a quick update, but we're not going to talk about it. Phillies in Arizona 1-1 in the 9th inning. I couldn't resist taking a quick glance. There's this factor, Frank, that no one's talking about. Tszyu was supposed to fight Charlo. That's the fight we figured was going to be made. Showtime was going to, I guess, broadcast it, probably make it a pay-per-view or something. I don't know. But Showtime's no longer in the boxing business. So a fight that probably would have taken place in Las Vegas. Now the only way Charlo can get the payday he wants without Showtime, he's going to have to go to Australia. And there's probably money in Australia that's going to lure Charlo to go there. And
interesting point.
Charlo's going to be at a handicap in Australia. Remember what happened with Jeff Horn and Pacquiao? I thought Pacquiao won the fight. I didn't think it was a robbery against Jeff Horn.
I had Pacquiao winning the night of the fight.
Yeah, I had him winning 7 rounds to 5. It wasn't outrageous. It was just a wrong decision. But the point is, it went to Jeff Horn there. And Tszyu is good enough to win a few rounds against Charlo legitimately, even if you like Charlo. And all he needs is to win 4 or 5 rounds if he's in Australia. And the odds are he'll get the decision. Not to say they'll be dishonest, because Devin Haney went there and he beat George Kambosos twice. But Haney kind of put it a little beyond reach. He won.
Right. It was too conclusive for them to steal it.
Right. And they had neutral judges for the most part. So, maybe Charlo can get a decision there. But I have to think it does favor Tszyu, the environment as well. Because Charlo's going to talk big. But he's going to go to Australia. and he knows people aren't looking at him as being such a tough guy because of the way he lost against Canelo. He hears people saying he wimped out. See, he can't go boasting, I'm going to do this, do that, because
Yeah,
they're not listening to me anyway.
that Lions moniker doesn't carry the bite you did.
Yeah.
Jack, here's the other thing. We're talking about boxing and about like how Showtime is gone, how the weekend fights on the networks are gone. And on the night that Zoo fought Mendoza, I can't say Janek's last name. Ali, how do you say it?
I'm looking at my report that's published in Boxing News here, okay? Called a Lone Wolf, his nickname. You know, I just call him Janabek, okay? We call LeBron James. We don't call him James. We call him LeBron. We call Michael Jordan Michael, okay? And I have a hard time, even though I did, and I wrote his name over and over in my report. And it's Alamba Hanuli. I can't. It's a tongue twister. Let's call him just Janabek.
Okay, Jack. Everybody knows. The people that are watching this show know who he is.
Right.
And here's the thing. During the Zoo fight, Zoo is fighting on Showtime, and Janabek is fighting on ESPN. Both main events are on at the same time. The Janabek fight ended in what? The 6th round?
Yeah.
Okay. And Zoo's fight went the distance. But I was going back and forth. I'm sitting here saying, how many nights are there? There's nothing on TV. There's no boxing to watch on a particular Saturday night. And now here we are. And there are two, a junior middleweight and a middleweight title bout, both airing on free TV, and I have to pick
all the time, Frank.
But that's another mistake with boxing, Jack. That's my point. It's not the first time, but the fans get screwed because they have to pick one. I only saw a couple rounds of Janabek. You wanted me to talk about the fight? He's an awkward guy and he's got some power. Other than that, I can't tell you a whole lot more.
I watched the whole fight, the whole show, but I have a confession to make. I didn't see the Zoo fight. The next day, I saw a couple of rounds because I knew what happened and I didn't want to sit through the whole fight. It wasn't controversial. Maybe if it was a controversial decision, I would have watched the whole fight in its entirety and then come up with my score.
I had more interest in the Zoo fight. That's why I watched that.
You can't, right. And then there's football the next day because they were on at the same time. But I'm going to tell you about Janabek. He's outstanding. I can now see why Demetrius Andrade didn't defend his WBO middleweight title against him, and he basically vacated it. I'm not saying Andrade didn't feel he could beat him at that time, but
it just worked that he doesn't want for the money. I get it.
He's had over 300 amateur fights, Janabek, and he's that good. And I guess the Andrade side figured he's a no-name. This is too big of a risk. Let's vacate the title. He beat a fighter, Vincenzo Galtieri, who couldn't punch a lick. Okay? There was a fight on the undercard, I have to say something that shocked the heck out of me. I mean, not the official result per se. Keyshawn Davis, okay?
I missed his fight.
Lightweight. Oh, yeah.
I know he is.
Right.
I didn't see it.
Unbeaten. He's fighting a fighter from Philadelphia, Nahir Albright. I scored for Davis 8-2, and I'm waiting for the decision. And I'm telling myself, I may have leaned over a little backwards and given Albright an extra round,
right?
Because I don't want to be too partial towards the favorite. It's probably going to be a 99-91 fight in Davis' favor. He's the A side. And I'm saying, I hope it's not 100-90 because I know Albright won a round. The scorecards come in. They're favoring the B side nearly. One judge has it even. The other judge has it 96-94 and the other one 97-93. The B side fighter who no one gives a darn about. Albright nearly pulls it off. Bad judging favoring the B side guy. And you want to know something, Frank? bad judging. We should be outraged no matter what.
You're right. I was going to say, it's killing the sport.
I was happy about it. I was smiling about it. I was saying, I'm going to pardon these judges for this fight. At least they're honest, okay? They're trying to do an honest job. I mean, they screwed up, but there's honesty there. So it shocked the heck out of me.
You know, Jack, watching some of the Janovic fight, and as you said, Galatasaray, he couldn't break an egg. But Jack, how bad is the middleweight division? Remember, for years, that was the glamour division, and you could always count on that division for some sparks and interesting fights. I think it's in the doldrums. It's dead. I mean, if Janovic is the best that we have in the middleweight division, that's not good for the future because he's not really exciting. He doesn't have a particularly fan-friendly style other than can hit a little bit. I don't think it's a good sign.
Well, you know,
I mean, all the divisions go through it, but the middleweight division is really, really pedestrian today.
Well, if you put him against Jamal Charlo, if Charlo was active, that's a very attractive fight.
That'd be a decent fight.
He's going to fight in December, reportedly, Jamal Charlo, not the one that lost to Canelo.
Right.
But what's going to happen is Charlo's promoted by Al Heyman in the PBC. Janovic is promoted by Bob Arum's Top Rank. So they're not going to make the fight. You know, they make fights like that unless they absolutely are forced to. So they'll look for opponents. Listen, look what happened to Artur Beterbiev. You know, after he stops Joe Smith, all this talk, him and Dimitri Bivol, everyone wanted to see that fight. So he's had one fight since then against Anthony Yarde. Then he got injured and this and this and this. Now he's supposed to be fighting Callum Smith. And the fight with him and Bivol, if it ever takes place, it's going to be a cash-out fight for one of them. They're going to figure, we just want to get the fight, get the payday, even if we lose. We have nothing else going for us. It's like you, Frank, when you were younger, you would sometimes go out with a girl when you had no action going on in the weekend or something, you know, just to keep busy.
Yeah, I'm not going to say we had names for those girls.
Let's not go there. Let's not go. I'm just having a little fun with you, Frank. That's all.
I understand, Jack. All right. The middleweight division is dreadful. Nobody fights in the heavyweight division. The light heavyweight division, there are fights to be made. I don't know if they're going to happen. The junior middleweight division could be exciting if Crawford enters it, if Charlo and Zoo get together. There's something going on there. Then we have the welterweight division, which Crawford has a stranglehold on. I don't know if he's going to fight there ever again. Is he going to fight Spence again? There's a lot of talk going back and forth with that. So things are pretty much up in the air with this sport.
Yeah, I'm in the gym, a regular gym, not a boxing gym, last week. And I'm on one of the machines, the Nautilus machine, and on the treadmill next to it, this guy and myself make eye contact. We look at one another's T-shirts. I happen to have a Matchroom boxing T-shirt on. The shirts that they contributed to the BWAA gift bags. So I have a bunch of them. So I had a Matchroom boxing. And his T-shirt catches my eye. Teofimo Lopez, one of his handlers.
Really?
There. And we're talking, and and then I thought afterwards, what a waste. Teofimo beats Josh Taylor. And what does he do? A dumb thing. He says, I'm giving up my titles and I'm retiring. What kind of power play? Was he hoping they would beg him not to and throw millions at him? And now Teofimo Lopez, who has 2 legacy victories, more than some of these other fighters have in their career against Vasily Lomachenko and Josh Taylor. I mean, how many fighters who have 2 legacy wins? Even the great Terence Crawford only has 1 true legacy win. Okay? And he can't get a fight, Teofimo. I mean, it just doesn't, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the way some of these guys...
Jack, he probably priced himself out, wants too much money. That's what the talk is with Andy Ruiz. They've offered him Wilder.
Andy Ruiz.
But Jack, if he ever gets in shape, he brings something to the table. He's a dangerous guy. But we don't know if he's in shape, and he doesn't fight.
Wait. His last fight, which was over a year ago, he got in shape for Luis Ortiz. He was in shape for that fight. He wins a close decision over ancient Luis Ortiz. So I don't want
He
to
beat him up pretty good, though.
No, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, it was a reasonable.
He had him down a couple times, falling all over the place. I mean, I think it was a good win. But you're right, Ortiz is old.
You know who I'm doing a story on? I'm working on Philadelphia heavyweight. We talked about the Rocky thing. Joey Dorjeko.
Right, Peltz's guy.
Yeah. And he was telling me this is going to be in, the story about all the camps he was in, the guys he sparred with, and this.
Oh, that sounds like a cool article.
No surprise, but Deontay Wilder's the hardest hitter. But he was also telling me about, him taunting Deontay Wilder during sparring because Wilder couldn't do anything with him, that Wilder didn't like him and this and that. But he was talking about the different camps. He said Vladimir Klitschko was the second hardest hitter. There was a rumor going around that he knocked down Anthony Joshua and knocked him out in sparring. And Joey wouldn't bite. He refused to answer the question. He says, I don't talk about things like that. What goes on in the gym stays in the gym. So I'm saying, you're saying
good for him.
He says, I'm not saying anything about it. So I said, okay. So I tried to trick him every way into saying, well, it's not a big deal. It was just sparring. He wasn't in shape.
He wouldn't go for it.
He didn't bite at all. He'd be a great witness. You couldn't shake him. You couldn't shake him at all. And
I like hearing that. That's pretty cool.
His manager, our friend Russell Peltz, who's his manager, because Russell Peltz, instead of building his guy up, white heavyweight, no, Joey's in shape, got 5 wins in a row. I'd like to see him rated on a given day. You never know what could happen, Russell could say. Instead, Russell's saying his own guy isn't dedicated. He's saying his own guy. Russell is criticizing his own guy. So you got to love a team like that.
And it's funny, Jack. That is the problem with these guys. They just don't get in shape like they could. But you just made me think of something else, and I'm going to have some fun with you. A couple guys who watch this show, who know you, who we both interact with. Some of them you may not know. You wrote an article about how Earl Spence could win a rematch with Terrence Crawford. Jack, I never got more IMs or text message about that, where these guys want to know what you're thinking because they think you're on Spence's payroll after writing that article.
You know what the problem is with your friends? I mean, they're nice guys. And I give them the benefit of the doubt as far as being intelligent guys, but they don't read. If they read the darn article, read the words and absorbed it, it said hypothetically if Spence was to win, these would be the reasons why. This would open the door if there are any possibilities, and you discuss the possibilities. For example, if you wrote an article, Frank, how you could beat Sugar Ray Robinson, okay? How you could, it's not saying you think anyone would beat him. You'd say, one, you have to crowd him. You have to shake him up early, get him out of his comfort zone. You put down a bunch of possibilities. There's something to open the door. And these guys, your friends, they don't read your friends.
Jack,
they don't read the
Jack,
whole thing.
Number one, most people don't read the article.
The way you are, Frank.
I agree with that, but
your friends.
Jack, I read the article from start to finish. I'll just say this. You left no stone unturned, and if everything that you said in that article comes to fruition, then maybe Spence can win. But, you said maybe Crawford or Spence will be better at 154. But you didn't mention that Crawford might be better at 154 also.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, of course. But I'm concentrating with Spence. I'm making points, stick to the fight plan. Spence, it's easy to forget. He was winning the fight for the first 5.5
And Jack,
minutes.
you said that in the article, but Muhammad Ali beat Joe Frazier in the first round. Jimmy Ellis beat Frazier in the first round. What does that mean? We know that Crawford starts slow and then picks it up. That's why Spence looked good in the first round.
If you were brought in as an advisor to Errol Spence, let's say his management team said, Frank, we want you to spend time with him. We want you to help with a strategy. Let's go over possibilities and let's discuss it with Errol what could be. I mean, you never know. But every point I think you would agree with to an extent. I had 12 points, not 11, and they eliminated my last point.
Well, I saw it was 11. What was the last one?
It was a dozen because the editors took it out because it was Bomac not being in his corner. But Bomac will be in his corner
right
now. But when Bomac, it looked like he might go to jail,
right, in the UK.
Listen, Crawford is very probably going to win. And he's probably, I think, win sooner, like 6 rounds or so. That would be my feeling because historically these rematches, and I learned my lesson with Joyce and Zhang. I'm not getting carried away here.
Right.
Probably is going to do a better job. And I can't see Errol Spence's confidence being so high. But then again, you never know. The caliber wasn't as great. But remember Mike Rossman beating Galindez comprehensively the first fight, and Galindez kind of turning the tables. Sometimes it does happen. But the manner of Spence's defeat was brutal. But
Mike Rossman's not Terrence Crawford, Jack.
I agree. But was I wrong on any of my points? That's what I'm saying. If those could conceivably happen, they'd all have to fall into place.
They could conceivably happen. You're right.
Listen,
did you mention that another thing could happen is, and I think this is plausible, maybe not probable, Crawford could be a little too overconfident because he beat him too easy. It was too easy. So he could be.
He'll come in the ring in physical shape. We know that, but mentally, Crawford.
Exactly, he had something to prove in that fight that no longer is there.
Let's go back to Rocky. Remember Apollo Creed before the first fight? He's in the promoter's office talking business, and the trainer's watching Balboa pounding on the meat, and he says, "Hey, champ, come here. I want you to take a look at this boy you're fighting. It looks like he means business."
He goes, "Yeah, I mean business too.
Give me another cup of coffee, Shirley.
Shirley, give me another. Yeah, I'm serious too."
Can you see that with Terrence Crawford in a business deal? He's called over, by someone in his camp. I want to take a look at Errol. It looks like he means business now.
Yeah, I mean business too.
Give me another cup of coffee.
Jack, on a closing note, 2 of my favorite fighters had birthdays today and yesterday. Yesterday, the great Tommy Hearns turned 65, and today, the great Evander Holyfield turned 61. Tell me that people did not get their money's worth when they paid to see those 2 guys fight. Can't do it.
Absolutely. Hearns was a highlight reel fighter, not so much excitement give and take in the ring. Looking at the highlights of his knockouts, I mean,
he had some of the prettiest ones ever.
The same with Tyson. It's not Tyson's fights that went back and forth. It was the highlight reel knockout. Holyfield was the opposite. He wasn't a highlight reel knockout guy.
No, he was a grinder.
Full action back and forth guy. Yeah, that's a good topic, Frank, that was discussed sometime. Who are the greatest highlight reel knockout guys of all time?
Well, Tommy would be high on my list, Jack, because he made Pepino Cuevas and Roberto Duran both fall forward. And when they fall forward, it's over.
The Brown Bomber, Joe Louis, a highlight reel guy. There are not that many of them, as many as we think, but that's what made Tyson himself really popular. Tyson's popularity endures because of the way he knocked guys out.
Jack, in the last couple seconds, let me ask you this. If you were Bobo Olsen, would you have fought Robinson 3 times after what he did the first couple times? Yeah, I wouldn't have gone in the same state with that guy again. That just goes to show you how tough and the mindset the guys had back then.
Yeah, it was a different mindset. And today's guys, if they lived in that era, they would have had the same mindset. And the
Yeah,
guys
they
from
had
that
to.
era, if they were fighting today, they would have the same mindset. Oh, I only need to fight once in a while. It's a mindset. You said it best. That's the word, mindset.
All right, guys. We'll be back on Monday night, starting Monday. And we'll cover everything that happens
Is it
between
this
now and then.
Monday,
Thank you.
Frank? Is it this Monday or the following Monday?
Well, I guess we have to ask Mac that, but I get my schedule's now back where we can be on Monday nights starting this Monday.
You'll clear it with our producer, and then you'll post something so the people
Okay.
that follow your page, yeah, will know for sure.
All right, Jack. Anything else?